Hey guys, we have been working through a bit of a series related to the spiritual disciplines. And some of what we've been talking about has led us to a place where we might actually be able to do something together in putting these disciplines into practice, in focusing on some of it, and in doing something together, united as a staff and a faculty. And so what I'd like to do is just sort of roll out a 4-week plan that we're going to do together in November. And the goal here is that as we get into this plan, we will be doing the same kinds of things, looking at the same passages of scripture, sort of be on the same page. We're working in the same spiritual disciplines. We're looking at the same passages of scripture, and that hopefully will be a thing we can come and rally around as we go through these 4 weeks in November. So I just kind of want to lay out a sketch of what that looks like, and then just talk about the goal in it besides what I've just mentioned. So the first week of the exercises is spending time in the disciplines and looking at scripture and prayer, looking at the way God responds to us and the way we respond to God and his love. And what we really want to focus on is the fact that there are things in our life that gets in the way of our right and good and healthy responses to God and to the call of Christ. So we look at examples like Matthew 4:18 through 22 and John 1:35 through 51 as examples of how we respond to Christ. We consider how we don't do that in certain parts of our lives. And then we look at the sacrifice and enthusiasm these characters exhibit and how their response can inform and shape our response and how we can imitate their response to follow Christ. That's the first week. Really, the focal point is what gets in my way of responding well to the call of Christ in my life, and how do I embrace with enthusiasm and surrender that call of Christ in my life, laying aside the sin that entangles and gets in my way and focusing on the call to follow Christ in every way possible. The second week looks like meditation and prayer on following Christ as a disciple. We reflect on his birth, his ministry, his life, his baptism, the Sermon on the Mount, his healings and teachings, his raising of Lazarus. And we look at the life of Christ in the Gospels, and we think about what it would have been like to be one of the 12, what it would have been like to follow him and to experience these things. And so we pay attention to Matthew 5 through 7, Mark 1:21 to 45, Luke 2:1 through 21, John 11:38 through 44. And we prayerfully consider what needs to change in our lives so that our following Christ and participating in his work in the world is more fully embraced by our lives. Third, in the third week, we focus on the Last Supper, the Passion Week of Christ, his trial, his crucifixion. And we look at the suffering of Christ. We consider the gifts he's given us, like the Eucharist, communion, like the fellowship of believers. And we consider passages like Mark 14:12 through 15:47. And we focus on the price he paid. We focus on the wonderful things that he's provided us, not only in his crucifixion, but also in the traditions and in the teachings of the church that have been handed down to us. What is it we remember and meditate on and celebrate when we come to communion? Really, what are we looking at? The sacrifice of Christ and the surrender of his life. And so how do I emulate that? And how does that deepen my following that we looked at in week 2? And how does that deepen my response to his call, like we looked at in week 1? Week 4, we prayerfully consider and we meditate on his resurrection and his appearances to the disciples. Perhaps we walk with him on the road to Emmaus, and we set out to love and serve him. And here we really consider and start looking for and finding practical ways that things in our lives change, so that our walk with him on the road to Emmaus becomes a way we walk out our lives. So we consider Luke 24, 1 through 49. We consider John chapter 20, 1 through 29. And we look at the ways that he now interacts with the world out of his resurrection. And we consider how we participate in that new resurrected life with Christ. Our goal in this 4-week time together is to put some of these spiritual disciplines into practice, to create personal exercise that's also a reminder of our professional calling. So we're called to follow Christ with the entirety of our lives, and our professional lives are part of that life entirety. But before we can get our professional lives as a vocation squared away and really intently following Christ, we need our personal lives to be squared away. We need our hearts and minds right with God and passionately pursuing him in relationship. And then we can pursue him in practical ways as that life sort of bleeds over or spills over, overflows into our professional lives as teachers. My hope for us in this time is that we create a space in our own lives for a fresh focus on our relationship with Christ and how that spills over into our profession. And that we can do that together as a community of Christians who do education. And so I'd like us to be united in practice, united in purpose, and united in seeking God's presence, so that we can be drawn closer to the Lord and find ways to live that out in our faith and in our work, which should be an expression of our faith. I hope the series and the time we're spending in the spiritual disciplines is a rewarding one for you. I hope it's helpful and it's bringing good things to light in your walk and in your time with Christ. I hope this time we spend in the month of November is also a rich time being unified and dedicated to these things that deepen our walk with Christ. Have a good day. We'll talk soon.